All right, we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about a very important topic of introducing service learning to your students, which will set you up for hopefully what's going to be a wonderful semester.
So the first thing we want to talk about is how to be prepared. So there's the logistical component, but then also what to expect. So as far as logistics, and this a lot of this goes back to your conversations with your faculty member, literally when are you going to introduce SL to students? Is it in the first class? Is it in the first week? And then the how will you introduce it? Is this something you're doing alone? Is it in collaboration with your faculty member? Are you using a slide deck? All those types of things. So that's something that you want to make sure you're having conversations about so that you're on the same page with your faculty. A couple of tips of things that you can expect walking into the room. So believe it or not, most students don't actually know that they're in a service learning course when you're presenting to them or when they enter the room on the first day. And so we don't yet have the most sophisticated systems of ways to communicate that to students. Some faculty may have sent an email out in advance, but you can pretty much count on some, if not all, of your students not really knowing that it's an SL course. And on top of that, some students don't even know what service learning is. They've never heard of it. And so your expertise really becomes important and plays into that. Though they may not have heard of SL before, it's becoming more and more common that students have done some form of service before in high school or at Northeastern. So that's something that you can play off of. But especially in comparison to high school, this looks a lot different, right? And then, including for yourself, it can be really overwhelming at the start of the semester. Some students are in a new city or a new place for the first time, just new classes, trying to get everything oriented up from down. And so taking that into consideration in the way that you present information to students so that you don't add to the overwhelming feeling, but can help put them at ease at the same time.
Absolutely. So, with that kind of background and thinking about the dynamics that might be happening in your classroom when you're doing your presentation, you'll also probably want to think about what is essential for you to cover. So, first of all, you're going to want to talk about what is service learning. As Lisa just said, many of the students might not have heard of what service learning is before. Some of them might have never taken a service learning class. And so, giving them kind of the overall background of what service learning is, which we covered in the first module that you did prior to training, and clearly we'll be kind of talking about throughout the course of the semester. So, framing it in your own language and letting them know, if you've had your own service learning experience, what that looked like, and really kind of personalizing it for them. Then you're going to want to talk about how does it work in your class specifically? How does it work generally? And then what are the different processes that you're going to use in your class for service learning? Part of that is going to be how are you going to get them paired up with their partner or their group that they're going to be working with throughout the course of the semester, if that's applicable. The other piece is really thinking about how is it going to be evaluated. That's going to be a big piece of the questions that students are going to have. And so, how it works really kind of encompasses those different things. Why service learning? So, your faculty member is going to have a reason that they've chosen to integrate service learning into your course. And so really reiterating with the students why that is and why this particular approach to learning has been deemed to be effective for what they're going to be talking about in the course. For a lot of you, you're going to want to cover who the community partners are and even more broadly, the different maybe issue areas that they approach or the skills that the students will gain from working with these different community partners as relevant to the learning outcomes of your course. So making sure that you are giving that background information, and just as a general rule, would not recommend just reading the descriptions that your students are going to have access to. I would think about how to put your community partners into your own words and really kind of talk about it and have a strategy for talking about it that is kind of outside of taking however many partners you have for your class and just reading the information that hopefully you'll make available to your students elsewhere. You're going to want to talk a little bit about what your role is as an SLTA, including how you want your students to be in contact with you, when you want them to be in contact with you, and when you don't want them to be in contact with you, and for what reasons. And then also kind of, setting any sort of boundaries that you want to set. And so letting them know both how you're there to advocate for them and work with them and help them make connections throughout the semester, but then also kind of letting them know how you hope they'll do that with you. You're going to want to definitely talk about what their next steps are toward probably the end of your presentation after you've gone through all of this. And so kind of letting them know what is the literal next couple of things that they need to be thinking about or doing, and kind of walking them through that process. So if you have created a Google form for them to submit their schedule to you and their preferences for the partners, then it could be a good idea to actually open that up and show them where the link is on Blackboard so they can see it. If their next step is to, let you know what group they'd like to be part of and set up a client meeting with their particular community partner, you're going to want to let them know that and walk them through that process. And so just giving them a really concrete idea of what those next steps are. And then finally, what your kind of personal tips for success are. If you have participated in service learning before, this is a place where you can talk about, your lessons learned on, best ways to communicate throughout the semester, best ways to get the most out of the experience. If you haven't before, that's okay as well, and just kind of giving them some general tips for success so they're feeling like they're walking into their service learning experience confidently.
And so to round out this section of the training, really thinking about how do you personalize this presentation or this introduction. So building off of what Becca was saying, use your own experiences, be them service or co-op, service learning, and so forth, and thinking about how you can deliver content that really feels meaningful. If you had great conversations with your community partners of partnership orientation or over the phone or via email, tell your students about that, and so that help get them excited. Just some general presentation guidelines. Please don't just read off of a slide or read from your notes. Students can see that. Think about ways to engage your audience. Ask questions, have it be participatory in different things like that. If you're not comfortable with asking questions and engaging, that's okay, but still don't read from your slides. Really, a lot of times thinking about how do you leverage student interest in either experiential learning and or service. So students are here at Northeastern because of experiential learning. And like we said, so many of them have some type of service experience. So thinking about how can they build their portfolio, their resume, and so forth, and their interest in these applied learning techniques to help get them excited for their service learning course. This can kind of speak for itself, but practice. Don't try and expect to go in there the first time and nail your presentation. You only get one shot to make that first impression, and so taking the time, practice on a roommate or a parent or a friend, really anyone, just so that you can figure out what it is you do know and what you might be stumbling over when you're talking about your partners or how service learning works and those different elements that we talked about. And then finally, both excitement and fear are contagious. So if you're excited, they're going to be excited. They're going to feel your energy and your enthusiasm. And on the flip side, if you're clearly not confident and kind of nervous and fear, they're going to smell that and they're going to know. And so really thinking about how can you be very clear and build that excitement. And again, if there are gaps in knowledge of what an orientation is or you don't know the answer to something, that's okay. And just let them know, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that, but I can look it up and get back to you. That's okay. So try not to worry. We know it can be overwhelming, but we give you all of this advice up front so that you do have that time to practice and personalize it and so that your students will be really excited.